Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Ramos Law Difference Makers podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jim Hoven, and I have such an incredible job here. This is such a blessing and a fun thing for me to do. And basically, it's talk to cool people doing cool things. In fact, we were talking to people that make a difference in the lives of others every day. And today, very special guest, very special process. You will want to share this episode. You're going to want to send it to someone that you know who needs to take care of the future of themselves and their family. Today's podcast, I've been looking forward to doing for a long time. It's taken me a while to get our guest on the show, not because of him, but because of me and what I've been doing to try to work everything around. So today I have a newer friend, a guy I really like, a rock star, and an attorney in the areas of estate planning, wills, probate, all these important critical things. And so I have with me Jeff Althaus and his firm Althaus Law. And we're going to talk about things that every person needs to know. And we're going to talk about a book that he wrote. And I love the title. I'm going to save the title because the title is one of the best I've ever heard. It should be a James Bond movie. I'm sure it might be in the future.
It might be.
It might be. But we're going to talk to Jeff. Jeff, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Thanks for having me, Jim. Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So tell me this. You're a lawyer. You could practice law any kind of law, anywhere. You decide to take on this area of protecting families through estate planning, wills, probate. And we'll get into what all those are, but can you just describe a little bit about A, what made you want to be a lawyer, and then B, how did you decide this part of the law?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'm kind of the black sheep of the family because they're all medicine or completely business and development, which I have no desire to do either of those. My parents actually, fun story that we could go off on a way too long a tangent on, but my parents actually met in Vietnam in the Army. They were both Army nurses in the hospital.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
So medical background all the way. And then, I just had professors in law school that I loved arguing with, and they told me I'd be a great lawyer someday. So started taking the intro to law classes, a lot of criminal stuff, and just loved it.
Were you on the track to medicine when you were studying? Or?
I was.
And then what made you say, you know what, besides arguing with your teachers and your professors, was there something that dissuaded you from medicine or?
Calculus. I hate calculus.
Calculus is a big one. You know what another big one is organic chemistry.
Oh yeah,
those are two of the ones that say, maybe something else would work better. Yeah.
Yeah. After like 3 rounds of different kinds of calculus, I was like, I don't think I like medicine this much.
That's right. And so what was the attraction then to law? Was there something besides, again, your ability to communicate and to battle for or against a certain point?
Yeah. So, law impacts us every single day. And I've always been the one in interviews that gives the corny answer, in job interviews even, like, why do you want this job? And it's always, I want to help people. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's what everyone says. I'm like, no, but I mean it. And with the law, so many people have issues that they have no idea how to deal with. And it impacts us, like I said, every single day, death and taxes specifically. So I kind of went into that area of law. But my dad had a small business, and he always had to pay an attorney and an accountant and all that kind of stuff to figure out all these really important answers. And he was always upset when he couldn't figure it out himself. My dad's a do-it-yourselfer, he built our house from scratch. He built a car from scratch. Like, the guy does everything. He's probably the reason I know pretty much everything I know.
Wow. Tribute to Dad.
He's a good guy. Thanks, Dad. My mom's no slouch either. She's the reason why I'm a good person. I just really wanted to help people and figured I knew I wanted to be in an area where it touched every part of your life. And the law really touches a lot of parts of everyone's lives.
Yeah.
And I was kind of a wild kid and had some wild friends that got in trouble with the law, and always interested in how I could have helped them out or anything like that. And that's kind of what led me down the path. I was always kind of in the back of my mind. I never really pursued it because I didn't think it was something that I'd be good at until people started saying, you'd be really good at this.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're in law school. When did you know that you wanted to protect people, basically their stuff from, and maybe protect people from themselves in a way, right? Because when someone dies and the stuff is left, then you either see the best or the worst out of people, is what I've seen in my experience. How did you come to decide that was the type of law where you were going to serve?
Yeah, that's an interesting story too, because I didn't know that for a really long time. So I started out, like I said, the criminal stuff was what really got me going in it, and started as a public defender in Anoka County, Minnesota.
Okay. A lot of public defense needed there in Anoka County?
Not really. But you'd be surprised. The public defenders everywhere are phenomenal people because they're just so overworked. And, even as an intern in the public defender's office, I would have 16 clients in the morning, and I'd have a half hour to meet all of them, learn their stories, and prepare to go in front of the judge for all 16 of them.
Goodness.
Yeah. So that was kind of a, throw you to the wolves learning experience. But it was fun when, you had actual innocent people or people that did crimes that they probably, they're never going to commit another crime in their life, and helping them out and getting them back on the right path. But as you get better at being a public defender, you start getting the bigger cases, and we started getting the felons and the repeat sex offenders and people who would beat their wives, and you start not wanting to defend those people. So
but you have a duty, right? Like, and that's not the crux of our conversation, but I am interested because you did it, and you obviously did it well if you're getting the bigger cases. What's the ethical, moral, professional dilemma that one finds themselves in that scenario?
Yeah, it's a tough one. There is an ethical obligation to give the best representation to your client. And that doesn't mean lie. It means find out what the law exactly says, and then how'd the police screw it up. And then use loopholes basically to get your client out of things, or just be like, well, they didn't actually break this law. Maybe they broke this other one, and it's a lesser offense. And that was okay for me on a few things. But when we got to the people where I looked at my boss and just said, I want this person to go to jail, I know I could get them off, and I don't want to. And they're like, well, you have to. And I just kind of looked at them and said, well, I don't have to.
Right.
And I left. That on top of 40 below zero winters and just ice
the
storms
little Minnesota chill.
Yeah. The mountains had been calling for a while. So
that's how you get to Colorado, because you wanted to be in the outdoors and be outside. Is that how you guys end up here?
Yeah, a mix of that, and one of the attorneys that I had worked kind of with, never really for, but just he was a professor of mine, a mentor, and would always take me around. He was part of a firm that was actually a international firm, and hundreds of attorneys, and he used to walk around smiling, saying, I'm the only happy attorney in the firm, and people would agree with him, and it's because he was the only one that did estate planning. And he just said, I'm an attorney that doesn't sue anybody. I help families protect their stuff. And I was like, wow, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to help people.
Did you know at that time what that meant? Like, did you know the depth of it? So you see this guy, this mentor, he's happy, he's fulfilled, he's not suing people, he's building relationships. Did you get what it truly meant? Or were you chasing, like, I want that feeling that he's got in practicing?
It was a little bit of both. At that time, kind of being a little down on criminal defense and, in court all day, every day, and just being worn down. It was kind of like, ooh, there's some light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe I can do something that makes me happy too. Because one thing my mom always taught me is you can't love others until you love yourself. And you can't help others until you help yourself. So if I'm walking around miserable and cranky all day long, I'm probably not going to be helping too many people. So that's what pointed me in the direction. I didn't really realize how much I loved it and had a huge passion for it until I just dove right into it.
And when you did, how did you learn that? Because again, you're going from one thing to another. They don't teach you everything in law school about every kind of law, so that you just do it. Did you use that guy as a mentor? Did you dive into books and seminars? What did you do to get great at this?
I did everything. Used that guy, went to tons and tons of CLEs, started just following attorneys around that did estate planning. The biggest thing though was when I moved out here, I was fortunate enough to just make friends with one of the public administrators in Adams County, which is an office that no one's ever heard of, but kind of like criminal law in the public defender's office. If you want to compare that to estate planning and probate, they have the public administrator's office.
Okay.
So if everything hits the fan and families are tearing each other's throats out, or there's no money left for people to run an estate, or there's just no one left alive and the estate has to be run, the judge has to have a team of people to appoint to clean up the mess. And that was us. So we got the worst of the worst cases every single day. So I apparently am a glutton for punishment and just love being thrown to the wolves. So just started from the bottom doing that again. And, being in court every single day, we got to see the plans it was kind of cool, the plans from the big downtown law firms and, the plans from these attorneys out in the middle of nowhere, and online plans and do-it-yourself plans and handwritten plans and no plans at all. And we saw what worked in all of them and what didn't work. And it's amazing how much money people would pay for plans that didn't work for them at all.
And they had no idea.
Yeah, you don't know until you're gone.
Yeah.
And then
it's your family that suffers really at the end of the day if it didn't work, right?
Right.
So you find out what works. So from there, did you open your own practice right away?
Yeah, not right away. I mean,
Okay.
I wanted to get experience, learn the area of law, and it sounds corny, but I wanted to be the best at it that I possibly could be.
Yeah.
And so just took that knowledge and realized there was more that I could be doing to help people, because a lot of what I was doing was still fighting. And I really liked how that guy said he was the attorney that never sued anybody. And I was in court every day. So, I mean, not technically suing people, but pretty close.
Cleaning messes up.
Yeah. And I really wanted to prevent those messes and, keep people out of court, keep people out of places like the public administrator's office. Don't get me wrong. They're great people, great attorneys, but nobody wants to be there.
Yes.
Nobody wants to be in court. When you're in court, I always say there's two losers that come out of that. Both sides usually end up not very happy. So at least in this area of law anyway. But so started a firm with the goal of just keep people out of court, protect people's families, avoid probate. And that is a huge phrase that can mean a lot of things. A lot of people just think after I die, I stay out of court and my family avoids stress. That's a big part of it. But it's also, what if you're still alive and you're incapacitated? Or, what if a minor child is set to inherit money and you're still their parent and completely still alive? You may still have to go to court to get a guardianship and conservatorship for that child. So it's just preventing all of those roadblocks from happening and making a nice little path that you just stay out of court.
So if now we can dive into the meat of the message, actually, perfect segue. As we're talking, everybody should have some sort of plan for the end. So when you're looking at this, is there an ideal time for a person? Because some people say, I'm too young. I don't have whatever. I don't have enough stuff. I don't have kids. I don't have something, so I don't need it. What are the criteria when someone needs to be thinking about this process of setting up a will, defining an estate, making sure that it goes in a certain direction versus leaving it to chance?
Yeah. Everyone always asks that question. How old do I have to be? How big does my estate have to be? And I normally go with red flag events in your life rather than like, you need to be 35 or you need to have $500,000 or a house. Red flag events are, you've got kids. The second you have a child, that's a big red flag for, hey, I should have a plan for this child. It's not even so much for you at that point, it's for your family. So that's the biggest one. That's when a lot of people call us and say, hey, I don't even know how to be a parent. Let's put this together. So that's the biggest one. Once you start owning property, that's another big time. You buy a house, you have rental properties or anything like that. You should have some kind of protection, some kind of LLC or some kind of trust or way to avoid probate in court for those real property assets. That's kind of a lawyer phrase, but your house and
Yes.
land and mineral interests and stuff like that.
Your stuff.
So houses, kids, marriage and divorce is a huge reason to update or get a plan. Divorce is usually an update to a plan. Marriage is usually getting a new one or your first one if you haven't had one ever. But there is no age. I've done estate plans for 18-year-olds and I've done estate plans for 81-year-olds. It really doesn't matter how old you are. Or, funny one, it doesn't matter how much money you have. You could have $10 billion or, mostly debt, and you could still need an estate plan.
Sure. That brings to mind, I'm sure you could go case after case and example after example of this, but isn't it true that Prince died without his situation together? And I don't know if Michael Jackson fell into that same place or not. I know they're fighting over all his stuff with the family, but if I remember right, Prince had all this stuff, including all this never before played music. And there was nothing from a guy that had everything, but because he had no family and he had been married or whatever, he just never took the time or something. Do you see that?
A lot. And we like to point out the celebrity ones because that catches people's attention.
Yeah.
But those are people that most people are shocked by because they would assume, oh, they have a lot of stuff, so they would have an estate.
Yes.
But that kind of perpetuates the misconception that you need to be a celebrity or you need to have a ton of cash and a lot of properties to need an estate plan. Mm-hmm. And the truth of the matter is, it's the regular average day Joe that needs it just as much, if not more, than those people.
What about life insurance? I know you don't sell life insurance and all that kind of stuff, but is life insurance a big part of an estate plan? Would you help someone if they were talking to you? Would you say, listen, Jim, based on what you're having, what you've got now, you might want to consider looking at life insurance because, or do you just take whatever assets the person has and say, this is how it would be allocated based on beneficiaries and wills and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, both. We always recommend life insurance for people. It's an estate builder, which is kind of cool. Someone who thinks they don't have much can make their children millionaires just with life insurance, which is a really cool thing to think about. But you have to be careful with that because, you want to put a plan together that decides when and how they get that money because no one wants to see an 18-year-old become a millionaire overnight.
Right. Just ask some of these NBA players.
Yeah. It actually happened in my family. For every document, for every thing we talk about today, I've got a horror story for everything. I won't bore you to death with all of them. But in my family, actually, I had a brother-in-law that inherited because, unfortunately, his father passed away at a young age. And as soon as he hit 18, he just got it all. And, he had a house and new cars and dropped out of school, quit his job, and thought that $1 million, was going to last his entire life. And it turns out it lasted a couple of years. And
man, what happened? So the end of the story, what happened? Did he figure it out? And I mean, obviously spent the money, but did then that create an education moment where he's like, ooh, I got to learn some things? Because I worry that that's like a lottery win, right? And lottery winners, if you look at the statistics, from what I understand, most lottery winners don't stay lottery winners. They ended up losing most of what they had, if not more.
Yeah. And at the public administrator's office, it was like seeing lottery winners every day and then seeing them. Most of the stories of the lottery winners from estates are usually end bad. And with my brother-in-law, it didn't end well. He ended up selling everything, had nothing to show for it, ended up getting divorced. So he's technically not even my brother-in-law anymore. And didn't end up going back to school, doesn't have an education, never got a degree, and now is working what he even calls a dead-end job and can't get out of the rut now. Where he was on a path to, finishing school, going to college, all that stuff, and then just overnight dropped it all.
So really what we're looking at when we're looking at plans, we got to think about not only planning for your family, but the succession plan of your family, because they might not be ready for that kind of thing. I lost my dad last year, right? Well, actually still this year, just in March of this year. And so there was an estate, and I was amazed by the time he had put into making this right. So, the way that the assets were spelled out in his will and just he made it easy for me. And so I think a lesson that I wanted you to really kind of speak to or expound on was something that I learned from losing, one of the two key people in your life with your mom and dad. Losing my dad was what he did for me to make my life easier, because as I was planning funerals, as I was doing all this stuff, he and I had talked about a lot of that. So I think that is something we should talk about too, is conversations as people are getting sicker and sicker. Even though he didn't die, he died way sooner than we had thought, but it was a complication. But he had enough that we had time to talk about what he wanted, and he had what he wanted in writing, and then what we wanted me to do for him in his passing. We had that conversation. So this is a tale of helping us as family members, as those left behind, make it through that with far less stress. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, definitely. And you hit on a huge, huge topic that I like to bring up to everyone, is the conversations. I tell people, all of my clients that come through my door, your documents are only as good as the conversations you have behind them.
Wow, which is the opposite of what normally say, right? Normally, if it ain't in writing, it didn't happen. So you're saying the opposite. So go into that.
Yeah, 1,000%. If there was just a generation where the majority of people thought that they had to keep everything secret. I mean, one of the advantages of trust that a lot of attorneys sell on people is that you can keep everything private. No one has to know about it. And at the public administrator's office, we just saw that ruin people's lives and plans. If the people don't know about it, A, how do they know where to find it? B, how do they know what they're supposed to do? And then C, how are they supposed to do what you wanted? Because they don't know where it is and they don't know what they're supposed to do. So a lot of times people's plans would get completely carried out. Assets would be distributed according to the law. Because if you don't have a plan, Colorado's already written one for you. So congratulations.
And it's probably not the best plan.
No. You don't want the state deciding where your stuff goes or who's in charge, because you get to pay them, the $300 an hour to carry it out. That's not fun. But they'll do the whole plan, and then someone will find a safe deposit box and be like, oh, there was a whole trust here. We've already distributed everything. Sorry.
And there's no undoing that.
Yeah. I mean, you can try, but people have spent the money by then, and what are you going to do? You know, a lot of people are judgment proof, and you can't really come after them. So you can try. It just creates a nightmare of a mess that if you just said, hey, Jim, it's in this safe. Here's the key. Here's your role. As soon as I pass away, do A, B, and C, and talk about that in advance. It stops that nightmare from happening. And that's just one scenario that can happen.
Right.
People not knowing what the plan says, especially if you're doing kind of an unequal distribution. I have people come in all the time and say, I love all my kids. All my kids love each other. They'll never fight. That's a fun story because they always fight. But they say, oh, I want to leave child A a little bit more because they're struggling a little bit more in life. But then they don't tell anyone that. And then the other 3 kids come up and start blaming child A for, holding a gun to mom and dad's head and making them leave them more when, in reality, mom and dad completely wanted to. And he didn't even know he was getting more money. But it then destroys the family afterwards. And now child A doesn't talk to his brothers and sisters anymore.
How do you suggest people have those conversations? Because obviously they're not comfortable, especially if mom and dad, we're going to do this unequal distribution. Do you give counseling to people as they're creating these and say, look, Mrs. Jones, you're going to need to tell these people this? Or how do you go about that? Because if they're not great communicators, or they're not real confident, or they don't know how each other act, or they're like, well, I don't want the confrontation while I'm alive on my part,
Sure.
Right? What do you do?
I have had many awkward conversations with entire families in my office.
Oh, so you'll bring them in and you'll act as part of the team to get the word out.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do.
It is?
I don't know why. So we always offer a family meeting at the end of all of our client's life cycle with us, I guess. So we do, the initial consult, and then we have a planning meeting, and we have a signing meeting. And then when all is said and done and their documents are completely ready to go, we have them invite their entire family in, and we sit everyone down and we walk through it together. Now, they don't have to do that. A lot of families are like, no, we'll just handle it ourselves. And I can give them some pointers and some guidelines and some handouts on how to have that conversation. And, for some people, you'd actually be surprised it's not a big deal to them, and they easily just talk to their kids about it, and everyone's fine. Mm-hmm. And the conversation ends up going 90% of the time ends up going way better than anyone anticipates. I say I have the awkward conversations in my office, but 90% of the time they end up being completely smooth, and everyone completely understands. They ask their 5 questions that they can ask mom and dad, because mom and dad are alive and sitting across from them. But more importantly, in those meetings, what they're more concerned about is, what the heck do I do when you guys are gone? Like, yeah, sure. However you guys want it to go, that's fine. But what do I do? Yes. And then they get to ask me, straight from the horse's mouth, like, here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3. Oh, and by the way, you can call me when they're gone and I'll still walk you through it.
Brilliant.
And that just helps a lot.
What tips do you have for setting people up for how to handle when they pass away? Like passwords, keys to this, account numbers, locations of stuff. I know that, again, with my dad, thank God, it was great. And with my mother-in-law, who's now in her, early to mid 80s, she said, look, there's a bag that looks like this and it's this place. That's going to give you what you need to know. But to me, that seems like the exception. How do you coach people, or anyone listening? What should they do regardless of their age? Because, I'm 54. That doesn't mean that I don't get killed on the way home on a car crash tonight, or whatever. What's the process there? How do you prepare for that side on the unofficial, the non-documentation side?
Yeah. So non-documentation is funny because we actually have documentation for that. But
okay.
So we give everyone just kind of like I guess you'd call it a little questionnaire, and it lists out, a place for them to put what all their assets are, where all those assets are located, who they need to call, who's their financial advisor, their accountant, who are these important people that need to be contacted when they pass away that are going to have the answers to all these random questions. And usually we have that too, and our business card is with all of them, so they can just call us and we'll have all that information for them. But we also recommend they give that to all the kids, because our goal isn't to stay around and, constantly be needed. I'm not a big fan of the attorneys that write themselves into people's lives and then they can't get rid of their attorney. We write ourselves out of people's lives. So once you're done with your plan, you never need us again.
Yes.
But these documents kind of help with that. But I should be a salesperson for LastPass because I don't get paid by them, but to me,
and explain what they are. So, LastPass.
Yeah, LastPass, like your last password.
Yes.
It's a online vault, like when you're surfing the web and Google will say, "Do you want to save that password?"
Right.
And then Google has kind of a vault.
Yes.
So, no offense to Google, I tell everyone not to do that and instead pay for LastPass. It's like $3 or something, and it's fantastic for estate planning because you need one password. That's why it's called LastPass. You need to remember one password for the rest of your life, and that logs you into your vault. And then your vault has all your passwords for everything you've ever logged into. And when you're surfing the web, it just automatically logs you in and logs you out.
Oh.
And you never have to, you could hold a gun to my head and say, "What's your bank password?" And I'd have no idea because it generates my passwords for me. And then, you have to renew your password and think of a new one and try to remember that.
Such a pain. I hate it.
Yeah, it automatically does that. So I have no idea what any of my passwords are except the one to log into LastPass.
Oh my
But
goodness.
for estate planning, this is where it gets really cool, is if you and I have LastPass and I pass away, I can name you as my emergency contact and you can request access to my vault. And then if I don't deny it within whatever time period I set, so let's say 24 hours, you get all access to my vault. So now you can log into all of my accounts. And that includes all the social media. And that's a huge thing we see a problem with.
Yes, I was just going to ask that on the social media stuff.
So people get hacked. Their Facebook is making weird posts after they've passed away. And that's stressful and emotional for people to see their loved one making a post after they've been passed away for a year. Mm-hmm. So you can log in and just shut all that down. You get access to the bank accounts and everything you need access to immediately. Shut down all the utilities. There's so many things you need passwords for, and LastPass does all of it.
Wow.
It's great.
So how about then on that note, when it comes to someone passing away, again, for us, there was some property involved and this and that. Mm-hmm. And so now we had to talk about changing over who owns what. We had to talk about electricity and phone and all that kind of stuff. Is there a best practices for that? Because I did hear actually on one point, like, look at don't make the change from one name to another super quick because there's a tax issue if you do that right away versus letting some time go by, because you'll gain the increased value of the home from point A of being deceased to point B of saying, now that's my home, that the tax basis changes. Is there anything, or is that a case by case, like, look, you need to see what all this looks like for that to understand it? Yeah.
So a couple things. It's different from transferring ownership of the house and what we call real property. So house, land, and minerals. It's not like it's real versus fake property. It's real versus personal. So personal property is anything you can pick up and move around, like everything in the house. And then real is the house. So as far as utilities and stuff are concerned, a lot of times those aren't a huge concern as long as, we're on the death of someone shutting most of the utilities down. And then if there's anything left over, they become a creditor of the estate and they have to submit a claim. So that's one of my favorite parts of probate is dealing with creditors, because then we finally get to give them the bird and tell them they're not getting paid,
yes.
Which is great. We've actually saved our clients over $1 million just in the past 2 years in probate with not paying creditors.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been fun.
That's huge.
Yeah, I know. We're really good at negotiating with creditors.
And nobody wants to do that, right? We'd rather have you do that. Nobody wants to, where they're grieving and they're figuring everything out and they're trying to say who owns what. And let's say your spouse dies and now you move and you got to change place because now you got to downsize, or you're living with kids, or whatever happens, or you move to a home. There's just a pain. Yeah. There's a lot of pain in all that stuff.
It is. The other pain is taxes. So I'll get back to the other side of your question.
Yes.
I actually have an LLM in taxation, so that extra boring degree in law school where you can keep going after law school and get a master's in taxation. So I've read the entire Internal Revenue Code, which is
you poor
sad.
guy.
Yeah. Super exciting stuff. But the basis is what you were talking about with the house. Like, do you get taxed on the gain when you sell it after someone passes away? And unfortunately, the best way to transfer property in Colorado and in most states is to die and give it to someone at your death. So basically how basis works is, let's say you buy a house for $1. Good job. And then 100 years go by, and now it's worth $1 million, and you go to sell it. The IRS is going to say, what'd you pay for it? We're going to call that your basis. All right, it's $1. And now what'd you sell it for? We want to know what the difference is, because that's capital gains to you, and we're going to tax the heck out of you on it. So you get hundreds of thousands of dollars you get to write to the IRS. Good job. If you transfer your house during your life, so this is it's one of the huge mistakes people make, is they try to put their kids on their house in order to avoid probate. And that's, never do that. If anyone listening to this falls away with one key takeaway, it's don't put your kids on your house. There are very specific circumstances where it helps, but they are few and far between. You need an attorney to guide you down that route. But what happens is, when you transfer your house to your kids while you're alive, they get what's called a carryover basis. So their basis is still $1. So if they sell it, even after you pass away, they're still paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to the IRS. Now, if you pass away and leave the house to the kids through a will or through a beneficiary deed or through a trust, they get what's called a step up in basis, which means that their basis now isn't $1. It's whatever the house was worth on the date of your death. And that's $1 million in our example. They can sell the house the next day and pay 0 taxes. That actually doesn't matter if they wait a month, 2 months after you pass away, because the IRS will value it on your date of death. Exactly.
Okay. Got it. So for people that are leaving or have property to leave to others, the takeaway of that is, don't put your kids on it in the meantime, right? Keep them off of it because of this step-up basis thing. So if you're listening, pay attention to that. Please take the free advice, listen to that. So now let's talk about wills. You talked about the red flags that we need to get for one. How do you know, like you said, you saw big firm plans that had plenty of holes in them, online plans, you saw what worked, saw what didn't. How does someone either A, come up with the plan that works, or B, find a good attorney that understands what's really going to work now? And I don't know if this is a thing that changes over time, like the loopholes change and the law changes and all that stuff. So if you have to keep updating it, how often, but how do you go about structuring or finding a great attorney to help you on this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have the same answer for pretty much every profession in life. It's find someone who specializes in exactly what you want and nothing else. So for instance, if someone calls me because they got bit by a dog, or there's a medical malpractice or a car accident or anything like that, I'm sending them to Ramos Law. I'm not even going to touch that with a 10-foot pole, because all we do is estate planning and probate. It's two sides of the same coin. And there are attorneys out there that will do everything, anything that walks through the door. We call them door firms.
Yes, door firms.
So, they'll handle your divorce, they'll file your bankruptcy, they'll draft your will, and they know enough to be dangerous. So the number one thing I say is find someone that's all they do. And that's why we like to work with professionals in the area like you guys. So we have a referral network of, you've been hurt? Well, let me send you over to Jim at Ramos. You need a divorce? Let me send you down to Betty over in, Broomfield or something like that. But if your attorney is it's fine to go to a firm that has multiple areas, as long as the attorney in that area is all they do is estate planning.
So these big firm plans that you saw with holes, they were people that were still acting as the door, so to speak.
Sometimes, and sometimes people just get stuck in their ways and don't stay up to date on the laws.
So there is an evolution process.
There is. So you want to have a list of questions. In that book I wrote, I have a whole list of questions to ask your attorney specifically to find out if they're any good. Like ask them, how do they stay up to date on the law? How do they do their fees? Because some people charge flat fees, some do hourly rates, some do contingencies, some have packages.
Is there a benefit to one or another that you see?
Well, I'm biased because we do flat rate packages.
And that's what would make sense to me. If I were guessing of all those you just listed, to me, hey, man, just let me pay the flat fee. That way I know what I'm getting.
Exactly. So with us and with most estate planning attorneys, I would say that know what they're doing. They know how long it's going to take them. So they've made a package that saves you both time and money. So with us, you know the price up front. That price never changes, and you get, exactly what was agreed to. And there's no hidden fees or, the hourly rate that takes 10 hours longer than you thought it was going to, and you just have to kind of guess what you're going to pay. I don't like that. So I usually recommend to avoid that, but that's not to say that there aren't good attorneys that do that. There are plenty of good attorneys that have hourly rates. But I think the big thing, I already said that all they do is estate planning and probate, but also just that you get along with them. Because if you get a bad vibe when you go, you should meet multiple attorneys when you're going to do your estate plan. I tell that to everyone that comes through my door. Like, hey,
don't let me be the last one. You go talk to people.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool.
And you should get along with them because they're going to know everything about you. I know more about my clients than their families do sometimes, and within the first hour. So, I've had children from different relationships surface during a consultation where the wife didn't know about said child. So, you've got to be comfortable with them and you've got to trust them. That's the most important thing.
And so you mentioned your book. Tell the title, why you wrote the book, and what the premise of the book is.
So I'm kind of sarcastic. I probably haven't had enough coffee this morning, so I apologize if I'm a little boring. But You Only Die Once is the name of the book. And
so good. Like, again, total James Bond movie, right?
Yeah.
Love it.
You only die once. Do it right the first time. So you only really get one shot at this. So why not do it right? Prepare. Make your family have the least amount of work and the least amount of stress possible so they stay together. Because I can't tell you how many times I've seen families completely fall apart after mom and dad pass away because mom and dad don't give themselves enough credit for how strong of a glue they are that holds the family together. And I'd also just never seen an estate planning book that was any fun to read, or most legal books in general are just put you to sleep. But, I've made it through the Internal Revenue Code, so that's not saying much.
No, it means you're a rock star. You can take anything. First you get thrown in the public defender's office, then you go to the OA's office, and now you read the tax code. You're glad for punishment.
I am. But I tried to just use general layman's terms, no legalese, just be kind of sarcastic and blunt. I'm very blunt about things, and just explain things to people in the simplest way possible. And it's only like 100 pages. So it's not like you're reading a whole novel here, and just give it to people straight. And that's the whole point of the book.
Absolutely. So do you find that you have a multi-generational practice? In other words, if you help mom and dad and then the family sees how important that work was, that then they do something with you? Because I know when I was practicing as a chiropractor, at one point I had 4 generations in my family, of a family in my office, and it just told me I was doing something right. The principles of health that we were putting out there into the universe, at least into our practice, was getting down the chain so that people were coming in to stay well, and we were understanding movement and all that stuff. Is that what you've ever seen in your practice too?
Yeah, and I love that about my practice because you really become part of the family. We like to say we're your family attorney. We don't do family law, but we're going to be there for everybody. So we've had grandma and grandpa come in and set up a plan, and then when they pass away, the kids come in and say, we've already met them through the family meeting that we had. Mom and dad passed away. What do we do? And we get the joy of saying, you don't have to do anything. They set up the plan for you. So then they'll come back and do a plan, and then they protect their kids. And then they say, oh, by the way, we're starting a business to pass on to our kids too. So we get to set that up for them and start the family business with them. And it's just cool to be there through all the generations.
I love that so much. So you mentioned the book. If you were, for people listening, again, I can't emphasize enough, having just gone through this, we've been fortunate enough that we've had this work done for a long, long time. You are who we send all of our people to here. Anyone that has that need, you're the group that we send to. From the information in your book, would you recommend that people should take steps first on their own to prep and get ready, and then meet with yourself or an attorney group like yours? Or what's the process of getting ready?
Yeah, that's a whole section of the book too. It has a whole list of things to prepare, questions to ask your attorney, questions to ask yourself, things to just Google and kind of find out. The bottom line is people come to us all the time having done nothing. They call and just say, hey, we don't know anything. Can we come in? And we always do a free initial consultation to answer your questions. I give you a little estate planning 101, which is basically my book in 10 minutes, and just kind of run through a lot of the stuff we've talked about today. But I love it when people prepare too. And if you're going to another attorney that maybe doesn't have that 101 kind of mentality, it's nice to just know a little bit about what people are talking about, because unfortunately, there are some attorneys, for either lack of knowledge or just wanting to make an extra buck, that will push you in the direction of one plan that may not be the best option for you. There's a lot of attorneys that will say the only plan anyone should have is a trust-based plan. And in Colorado, that's just not true. You can avoid probate here with what's called a beneficiary deed, which basically just lets you avoid probate on your house. I won't bore you to death with the details, but it's a substitute for a trust plan. It can save you a couple $1,000s.
Wow.
And if that's all you need, I tell people, why buy the Lamborghini when the Cadillac's going to do just fine? And it's going to meet the exact same goals that you have. So,
do you guys work with people out of state, or are you licensed in multiple states, or is it a thing where you have to be licensed in the state in which you practice even?
Yep, that one. So you've got to be licensed. So unfortunately, we can only help people in Colorado. But fortunately, I've worked with, I think I'm up to almost all 50 states. We've got like 47, I think. But we've worked with attorneys in almost all the states. And we know the ones that are good, that we've worked with before in the past, that charge a reasonable price, and that we feel comfortable with working on multiple projects with. So we can what usually happens is one of our clients has a rental or vacation home in California or Ohio or wherever, and we've just worked with attorneys in the past to transfer those houses into our Colorado trust.
Beautiful.
So
if anybody listening to this is out of state and they had questions or they want to learn more, they could literally call you, and if you couldn't help them, you would either team them up with someone, or you would tag team. If they really want to work with you, you might be able to tag team where they helped you work something where they're still working with you in some way. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if they have property here, but they're doing their main plan in Arizona, let's say, we can be the ones transferring the property to whatever plan they're doing in Arizona.
I see.
And just work with a lot of different professionals. So
nice. So one quick thing and then a question. Quick thing. Could you give a compare contrast story of some situation that went horribly wrong because of either an ill-advised plan or no plan, compared to a really well done executed plan, and how the difference in the result, whether it be the money side, the family tearing each other apart side, can you give just one real life example to compare and contrast that?
Yeah. The one that I tell most people about is the very first probate case I ever took at the public administrator's office. That was really throwing me to the wolves on this one. But common law marriage is a thing here in Colorado. And a lot of people think, I've got to be married for live with someone for 7 years, and then I'm common law married to him. I have no idea where the 7 came from, but like 90% of the people in the world think 7 for some reason. Has nothing to do with it. You could live with someone for a day and technically still be common law married.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the key is the main thing. There's a list of factors a judge will look at, but the main thing is, do you hold yourself out to be married? So if I walk down the street and say, Jim's my husband, congratulations. If you agree to that, we're common law married. And so Colorado is insanely easy to be common law married in. And the very first case that I took, this couple was common law married. They introduced themselves as married. They just told everyone they weren't going to the courthouse. They didn't want to have a big wedding. They didn't want to make a big deal of it. They'd been married before, which is how common law usually comes about. And so the problem with that was wife had a bunch of beneficiary designated assets, and a lot of assets, and she was kind of the breadwinner of the family. So 401ks, IRAs, retirement accounts, life insurance policies, and we're talking millions of dollars. And she got a lot of those through her job, and she had never updated her beneficiary designations to be her new husband, the common law husband, so not legal husband. And then husband, it had a good job, but had a lot of debt, and things were going fine, and they owned a couple properties together, but it was all heavily leveraged, so lots of debt on these properties. Most of the assets were in her retirement accounts, and she made a will that hand wrote, just did it herself. I leave everything to my husband, and named him and all that good stuff. And this is a big misconception that people have in estate planning, which ruins a lot of families and plans, is that I have a will, I have a plan, my family's good. And it's just not true. Beneficiary designations trump everything. Wow. If you think of a totem pole, they're on the top. So she passed away at like 45, completely unexpected, didn't have time to, update the plan or anything like that. And it turns out her sister, who she hadn't talked to in 10 years and now had a falling out with, and they didn't like each other at all. And sister specifically hated new husband, was actually named the beneficiary in all those policies because husband wasn't in her life when she started that job. So she just named her sister and all the beneficiaries. So sister took all the assets. Husband inherited all the debt and had no way of paying it all. Ended up having to sell everything. We had to go to court and sue her. We did end up getting him some money in the long run, but not half as much as he should have got.
Right.
And
with a whole lot of pain.
Yeah.
And what about the good side? Let's finish on the good side. Thank goodness you started with that story.
So the good side, I have tons of good stories. If you want to stick with the common law marriage thing, we just had a couple go through that. We always have people just sign an agreement that says, hey, we're common law married. I'm giving all my rights to my spouse, updating all the beneficiary designations. We work with the whole team. So financial advisor, you brought life insurance up earlier, the life insurance agent, accountants. And we were able to put this whole team together for this couple that now we've built an entire plan. I do this for all my plans, but I tell everyone at the end, I guarantee this will work how we said it will, or we'll do the entire probate and everything to make it work right for free. Fortunately, to keep the good news going, they're still alive, happily common law married, but they know that all their assets are going to go exactly where they want it to because everything's updated.
Beautiful. Okay, so now, final question. Through your life to this point, has there been one piece of advice that has been your guidepost or your beacon that you follow that has helped you get to this successful point in your career and your life? Or is there something you've learned along the way that has become that guidepost for you? And if so, would you share it with us so we can all take and learn from it?
Yeah, there's a ton. I won't spill them all out. I'm a religious guy, so just following God and praying all the time and going to church is huge to me. Mm-hmm. But as far as like a saying, you're responsible for all the problems in your life, and once you realize that, you can start fixing them. That one has always stuck with me. Because you see a lot of people that have excuses for everything that happens to them, or they want to blame other people for things that go wrong. And if you just internalize it, even if it's not 100% your fault and there's no way it could be, internalize how you could have done things better. How can I always improve and just be the best that I can today? It'll make your life a million times better.
Jeff, we didn't even get into, I can't believe 45 minutes went so fast. Yeah. We didn't even get into all the philanthropic efforts that you guys do as a firm, the fact that you won the Small Business of the Year in North Glen. You obviously are a product of this philosophy, both your faith-based living and this advice that you just shared with us. All of that being said, man, we wish you absolute continued success, but you have to give our audience a way to get a hold of you. How can they reach you? How can they learn, at least buy the book, so that they can start this process? Even if they can't use you because you're not in their state or it wouldn't work out, you can help. I mean, I know that I'm inspired to make sure that all my stuff is right for my family to keep everything together. How can they connect with you, reach out to you, or get the book?
Yeah, the book's pretty easy to find. You Only Die Once by Jeff Althaus. It's a bestseller on Kindle and on Amazon, so it pops right up. You can always go to our website, althauslaw.com. It's a fun one to spell, but I'm sure it'll be somewhere. And then 720-340-2783 is the phone number. You can always reach us.
Well, we wish you nothing but continued success. We're huge fans of yours. We've connected more over these last several months. And just again, thank you for serving our people that need your services. And thank you for what you do to make a difference in the community. Again, I know this is going to get shared a bunch, so you'll take care of those people too.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. It's a pleasure to be on here and keep being awesome.
Friend. You got it. We'll talk to you soon.